Hi, my name is Habraken. I'm from Colors and I'm going to show you how to deploy your Sitecore solution to the cloud in Azure PaaS. What is PaaS? PaaS is one of the types of cloud hosting available and it stands for Platform as a Service. It's called Platform as a Service because the platform, the hosting and server configuration is already done for you, in this case specifically targeted at Sitecore. Azure Cloud Services is such a PaaS offering, and the most prominent characteristics of PaaS is that it's volatile and stateless. We'll get into what that means for us in a moment. And you can actually see this as, well, Sitecore as a service. Next to PaaS, there are two other offerings as well. It's infrastructure as a service and software as a service. And here you can see that each offering translates to one of the services that Azure offer. It's called virtual machines for the infrastructure as a service, where you have to configure everything yourself. You only get the access to a virtual machine that Azure hosts, whereas apps, which was previously called websites, has configured everything for you, so it's very easy to use, but you do have a lot less control over the environment. And PaaS is actually in between those offerings. The benefits of cloud, and I guess most of this is an open door to you, but it's low cost because you do have zero capital investment and low operating costs. It's elastic, it's very easy to scale, and it's reliable as well because the enterprise grade infrastructure offers up to 99.9% availability. And I've seen some higher figures as well already, so it's very reliable. And the benefits of PaaS, next to what we've seen as the benefits of cloud hosting in general, is that you can set it up very quickly, but also you do not have any server management or maintenance at all. So it's very flexible. You can easily restart a machine. You can easily restore a machine, create new machines, and when there's something wrong with your machine, you can easily delete and recreate it because you will never update your installation. And in case of failure, it automatically restarts your machine. So hence the hammock, because that's how I feel as a developer when working with Azure PaaS. And I guess this quote explains very well what Sitecore Azure offers you. You can really focus on the application and its data rather than the infrastructure it runs on, and that not only goes for the enterprise, the customer using Sitecore, but also for us as a implementation partner, because we can concentrate on the development only, our implementation of Sitecore. And as with all benefits, there are some challenges as well. As I mentioned, it's stateless, so that means you do not have any persistence of data on your server. So you can't store anything locally. You do not have control over the time slot for the updates. Of course, you can schedule your own updates and reinstalls, but whenever Microsoft decides to update your OS or to install a security patch, it will do so, and it can happen any time of the day. The deployments take some time, 15 to 20 minutes easily, but could also be half an hour depending on the on your internet connection and such. So deploying takes a while. And for me as a developer, I also think it can be a challenge that everything you do is built, so that also goes for development and testing. And if I do not want to use the emulator, which is available, I'm actually built for my I'm I have to pay for my tests. But on the other hand, you can turn off the machines and the services you do not use, so the costs won't be too high. It wouldn't be too high. And there are some other small issues, like you have to include all files, including your Sitecore folder, and there's a maximum file length, but we'll get into that in the demo. So what are the requirements to go to the cloud? Well, first of all, you have to modify a solution to be able to generate the Azure packages that you use to deploy to the cloud. And second of all, you have to move your logging and caching to a portable solution because of the volatile character of the service. I won't go into logging too much because it's pretty much standard .NET stuff. Just use Log4net to log everything to a SQL database. And I also recommend to use application insights, because that gives you very good insight when remotely monitoring your service. Enablement servers are needed for swapping. Enablement servers is a term that's used by Sitecore. Microsoft actually calls it staging, and it just means you have to have 2 of every production machine to be able to swap during a deployment. The caching and session management, as I said, you can't store it on a machine, and because your machines are stateless, you do not have something like sticky sessions in your Azure load balancer, so you can't use the improc session management. What you can do is you can use the Redis cache, and Redis cache is available out of the box for Sitecore 7.5 and update 1 and higher. If you have an earlier version of Sitecore, you can download a hotfix, which is in the knowledge base article I mentioned in my slide. But there's another issue as well. Currently, Redis cache doesn't support the session end event, and that's the event that's used by Sitecore XDB to store everything to your MongoDB. So, well, if you are using XDB, you cannot use Redis cache at the moment. I hope they will fix it very soon. But for now, if you are using XDB, you probably already have a MongoDB running, so use the MongoDB for your session management. And on the right side, you see some old ways of doing your caching and session management. They're all obsolete and not supported anymore, or not recommended anymore. Table storage is file-based, and it's cheap, but it's quite slow. Classic web role cache, pardon me. Classic web role cache is the predecessor of Redis cache, and SQL Azure Session is also something that was used before. But I'm mentioning this because when you're Googling on how to set this up, you will find some older articles, and you see a lot of different techniques being used. And please only use the Redis or cache or the MongoDB right now if you're setting up a new Azure environment. Well, the infrastructure, I already mentioned it before. Testing and acceptance isn't all that different from what you're used to, but the production environment needs to have those enablement machines, which are blue in this overview, and you also have to separate your content management and content delivery. This leads to having at least 6 machines in your production environment. Well, that actually is the Sitecore recommendation. I already ran successfully with 3 machines, but that's the minimum you can use, because you have 2 content delivery machines that are able to swap, and you have to have at least one content management server. And if you do only use one content management server, you have to know that it can be down for like half an hour during unscheduled updates. So how to deploy to this environment? Well, first of all, you do have the Sitecore Azure module. It's very easy to use because it scaffolds your Azure config, but there are also some disadvantages. First of all, it wasn't supported for Sitecore 8 when I was writing these slides. Now it is, but it demonstrates that it always lags behind a bit. So when I started working with Azure PaaS, I wanted to use Sitecore 7.5, but the module was only available for 7.2. And whenever a new version of Sitecore is released, it takes some time before the Azure module is launched. And then there are some other things, like you always have default database installation, which you have to manually alter, and you have less control of your environment. So if you have any specific configuration or exotic requirements, such as a fixed IP or something like that, it's not possible out of the box. And that's why I like to use the custom Visual Studio deployment. Doing so, you have full control on all your configuration details, and you can actually custom tailor your deployment to fit your own best practices. Initially it's more time consuming, but I think it's worth it. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. So it's time for the live demo. I'm going to do a cooking show style demo. That means that I'm going to show you how to make the dough, how to put in the raisins, and how to slice the apple. But well, the apple pie was already in the oven. And the reason I'm doing that is I had to prepare my stuff to get it all working, to show you a fluent demo, and to skip all the waiting time that's incorporated when setting up an Azure environment, and while deploying to the cloud as well. I'm going to show you how to deploy a out-of-the-box default Sitecore 8 installation to a fully Azure enabled cloud service running your Sitecore application. And I also want to mention that this is our way of deploying, so there is more than one way, I know that, but this is how we like to do it. So we'll start with a default Sitecore installation of Sitecore 8. Please note that you need Visual Studio 2013 update 4 or higher, and that you also need to install the Azure plugin so you can convert your project to a Azure Cloud Service project. If you have those, then you can start with a default development environment. What you see here is that I have a regular development environment with the recommended Sitecore setup. That means the website folder and the solution folder are separated. This is my solution folder, and this is where my Visual Studio solution lives. But if you go to the website, you are actually visiting the website folder, and I'm now going to test if everything works, because this is the first time I'm running this installation. I'm logging into Sitecore 8. Yes, I do not want to store my password. Okay, going to the content editor, testing if my improc session management works, because that's what I'm using locally. You can use Redis while developing as well, if you use your cache for more than only the session management, which we do in some cases, but for this demo I'm using the default setup. I have two build types, Azure and development, which is actually release and debug. and I also have 2 publishing profiles. Let's show them. The development profile publishes to the website folder, which is my local IIS instance, and that has a corresponding translation file. The Azure translation file contains all the specific Azure configuration, and you can see I didn't set up a MongoDB here. It's just running without XDB for this demo. I'm deploying to the deployment folder in case of Azure, and that's something I want to point out, that next to the solution and website folder, I'm also using a separate solution for the deployment. By doing so, I can isolate my Azure configurations and store them in a separate project. So this is just a copy of my website folder, which of my solution, and what I've done, if I'm going to go to the let's get, yeah, okay, Sitecore SUGCON. Okay, what you see here is normally the app data folder is empty, and I'm going to copy my data folder into my app data folder, because when deploying to Azure, your data folder needs to be in the web root. And the second thing that I'm doing is I'm cleaning out, I'm emptying all the folders in there, so I do not have any application state when deploying to the cloud. I also changed my app data folder in the Azure translation and pointed towards this, or actually I should say data folder, and pointed to the app data. Okay, so I'm now going to open the second solution, which is my deployment solution, and from here I'm eventually going to deploy to Azure. Okay, let's close this. Initially you do have this, and the difference with the development solution is that here I include everything, so also the Sitecore folder, because when you're going to deploy to Azure, the receiving machine is completely empty, or can be completely empty. I'm opening up the CS profile, and here I need to do a trick. I see I have 2 public entries, but that doesn't matter. What I'm doing here, this syntax ensures me that every file in those folders will be included in the project. So when I'm going to publish, any new file in there will be published as well. And that's needed because I'm going to deploy from my development solution to my deployment solution. The other thing I'm going to do is I am going to include all the references I need, and normally I'm doing that by creating a referenced assembly folder in the root of my project, and just including everything in there. Once again, Azure needs the whole package. Then I'm going to convert it to an Azure project, because I already have done that. I'm going to show it to you on the other solution. So this is what you do. You just click on Convert to Azure project, to a Azure Cloud Services project, and what it does, it generates a second project in your solution. You can see it over here with all your Azure configuration. I'm going to rename it because normally it postfixes is my regular name and puts .azure behind it, but this is one of the issues I had, that Azure allows up to, I guess, 260 characters for a UNC path, and when your folder name of your project is too long, you're going to hit that boundary. So I'm going to rename my my project to stay in that limit, within that limit. The other thing I'm going to do is within the Sitecore folder, within the red controls, you see all the skins that you have in the rich text editor within Sitecore, and they contain a lot of files. And what happens, and it's a bit fake when you're deploying for the first time, when there's too many files in your deployment, it's just going to give you a timeout, but it won't say it's a timeout. It just will generate an error. By excluding all the themes, all the skins in that editor that you don't need, you're going to have a lot less files, and this timeout problem won't appear. This timeout problem is also specific for Visual Studio, so if you're using PowerShell scripts to deploy, you do not have to do this. But they are useless because you're only using one skin. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm unchecking automatically NuGet updates because I'm having two solutions. I'm having some differences in NuGet installations. When I go to the deployment packages folder, I can see there are some extra NuGet packages in there, and I do not want to have Visual Studio alter my solution. Okay, so now we're going to the to SQL Server, because we're going to let me log in first. We're going to make the databases cloud enabled. We're going to make them suitable for uploading to Azure. Let me expand this, and we need this SUGCON master. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a script that's supplied by Sitecore. You can, if you Google on it, you will find it very easily. It's also included in all the manuals that Sitecore has about deploying to the cloud. And when you open the script, it's just a SQL script. You only have to run it once on each database. And I'm now just going to hit verify because I already executed this, so I do not have to do this again. But that's all there is to it. And then you can export the database via tasks, export data to your application, and you can next. You only have to enter a file path, and it will generate a backpack file for you. So over here I have the backpack files, 4 files in total in this case. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to upload those backpack files to my Azure subscription. So this is the first time I'm going to log into the portal, and I'm going to create a storage account. I need one to be able to upload those databases. I'm going to use the new portal. Microsoft also has an old portal, and that's called manage.windowsazure.com, but I think this is working way better, and the interface is also easier to understand. I'm going to create a new data storage account. And you can pick for this demo. I'm going to pick the cheapest ones and view all. You can see the prices right here. The starting cost per 100 gigabytes in euros, and I'm just going to go for the cheapest account here. Select the resource group and a subscription, and what's important is a location. Of course you can have multiple locations, but when you have a storage and you're going to upload databases, they all need to be in the same region. When you have created the storage account, you can go back to Visual Studio, and I'm going to open up the Server Explorer, and when I expand this list, I immediately get a login screen, so I can log into my Azure subscription as well. I'm going to sign in, and I see the storage account I just created in a moment. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to create a new blob container. I've called it databases, and within this blob container I'm going to upload my files. You see there, in this case they are already in there, but you just have to hit upload new file and you can select the file from your location, and that's all there is to it. Yeah, here they are. So just select them and specify a folder if you want, but it's not required. Yeah, okay. So when you did upload those packages from Visual Studio, you go back to the portal, and I'm going to create a new SQL database. So I select the right subscription, and I'm going to configure a new server. In the new portal there is you can only create a new server, a new SQL server, by creating a new database. So the location should be West Europe. Okay, that's it. I'm going to go to my existing server right now. I'll first change the password to make it valid, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so once you've did this, you get a database. I'm just going to select the one I've created before right now, and you're going to create a new database. I'll pick the SO standard. That's enough for my demo, and it runs Sitecore perfectly fine. And now I'm going to create a empty database. And what was kind of confusing for me the first time when I did this, by following the manual of Sitecore, you create this database and then immediately you delete it again. I'm doing that right now, and I wondered why that was, but the reason for this is you cannot use, you cannot create a database, a server, you cannot create a SQL server without creating a database, and you also cannot upload or import those backpack files if you do not have a SQL server. So now I can import a database. Going in here, select my storage account, select my container, which is called databases, and then I can go into there and see the backpack files. So you can't import backpack files when you do not have a SQL server, and you need to first create a database for that. So hence the empty database and deleting it, which leaves behind a SQL server. And over here too, I'm going to go for the SO standard. And I'll just create the database, and just this generates, when I'm going to browse all resources, it generates the databases, and you can see them right here. So he restored it from my machine, upload it, and what's nice is when you open up one of those databases, next to the fact that you see the monitoring in all screens, you also get the connection strings for your application. So we're going to copy and paste those in the Azure configuration transformation. That's right here. Yeah, and you just put in those and you're ready. That's all you have to do for the database. So now we're going to look at the caching, and first we paste in this section, which is provided by Sitecore as well. There's no configuration in that part, and we're going to create a Redis cache. This just consists of selecting or choosing a name. I'll first select the right subscription and the right resource group, which has to be in the same region. That's this one. Yeah. And I'm selecting again the cheapest over here. For production environments, I would always go with 1 GB and more, but for demo purposes 250 megabytes it's okay. So you have to look for a name that isn't used yet by anyone and this generates your Redis cache. If I browse, I will see it right here, and I have to browse to it and expand my Redis cache settings, which is, and then I'm going to copy this hostname, and I'm also going to copy the primary access key, and those keys are necessary, they are required to put in my Redis session state provider, which is added to the configuration as well. You can see it right here, and this is all there is to it to bind your session state to your newly created Redis cache. Okay, so I'm now going to create a new cloud service. Here it is, because I'm ready to create my my deployment configuration. I'll first find my my DNS name, pick up the resource group and the location once again, and over here you would be able to select a package as well, but we're going to deploy directly from Visual Studio. You can also export your Azure package from Visual Studio and upload it manually. This is the cloud service we just have created, and if I go to my deployment solution and to right click on publish, I can select the cloud service I just created over here. I'm going to go for a production environment, and you can also enable remote desktop, which is very useful when you want to test some configuration without having to deploy your whole solution again. This is the deployment label you can choose, and also I should say that you do not should enable profiling. I'm not sure why it's doing this, but it kills my my server performance, so I would not recommend using that until I found out what the problem is. And then you just go click publish. For now we do not yet click on publish because we have to do some other things first. First of all, I'm going to deploy, checking if there are any changes in my environment. There are not. Normally you would have some, but in this case there aren't. Okay, publish. What I also do is I clean out my my version control so I can roll back after the deployment, but I'll show you that in a minute. So what I did, I deployed to this website folder right now, and if I refresh my local instance, you can see he logs me out of Sitecore, so you see this is updated. So by publishing locally, I have overwritten the website folder, which is bound to my my local IS. Now I'm going to deploy to Azure, and in my development solution I'm going to click publish to Azure, and this does exactly the same as to the website folder, but now it publishes my my solution to my other project. In here I do not get any file change notification because I didn't have any file open, but it is updated, and I'm now going to click publish, and that's all there is. If you have set this up, you can just publish first from your development solution to your deployment solution, and from your deployment solution you have to click on publish as well, but then to Azure. I'm going to click replace. When you already have set up a cloud service, you get this warning. Of course, if you have a new server, you wouldn't get this. And what you see right now is this status bar is advancing pretty fast because I fast forwarded this in my pre-recording. But normally this process is the process that takes up to about half an hour. You can follow the process right here. Yes, it's still updating. It should be ready any moment right now. Yes, it is. My instance is ready and it's starting, and I'm waiting for the completed sign when my deployment is fully finished. Yes, it's complete. Okay. I have to show you one more thing. Initially, this web rule setting in your service definition is set to small, and I'm going to change it to large because small is an A1 and that doesn't run your Sitecore because it's below the minimum requirements. If I go into my colors SC8 cloud app, I see that the size is large, and that's what I need. So you have to alter that service definition and set it from small to large. Okay, so here it is. My Sitecore solution, my default Sitecore installation is running in the cloud. I'm going to log in, change the password in the meantime, of course, because it's now public. Yeah, and I'm going in the content editor to change my content. When your session management isn't working, you get session expired messages all the time when you're in the content editor. So that's a telltale that something went wrong, but now everything is working fine. So I'm going to change the title of my website to Sitecore Experience Platform in the Cloud, and I'm going to publish it to prove that everything works as designed. Yeah, I'm going for a full republish. This is actually real time, so you can see that it is quite fast. So now I'm going to my cloud app again, and you can see that it now is changed to in the cloud. When I'm going to go to Git, I see that there are a lot of changes, and these are all temporary. You can put them in the git ignore file. I'm just resetting my my branch and cleaning it out, so it's my working directory is clean again. And the other thing I would want to show you is that when you click on your cloud service, you can click on connect up here, and you get a download of a remote desktop connection file. Yeah, here it is. And this way you can log into your machine with the credentials you've set in the publish wizard. Let's speed this up too. Yeah, here I am, and you can see if I go to the disk E, actually the file, the partition it uploads your solution to is different from time to time. So by doing this, you can test some changes or fix some bugs. For example, if your connection string isn't working, it's not very useful to change your connection string in your development environment and publish everything again and wait for another half an hour. You can just go into your remote desktop connection, go into your machine, which is actually a virtual machine, and alter it, test if it works, and then change your project and deploy from Visual Studio. So that's all there is to it, and your cloud service is running fine. So let's evaluate this way of deploying. Well, first of all, I think there are a lot more advantages than disadvantages. First of all, it's completely Visual Studio oriented, so you almost never have to leave your Visual Studio environment. And the Azure specific configuration is completely isolated from your development environment, so that's an advantage as well. And last but not least, you do not have to include your Sitecore folder in your development solution, so that's a great advantage too, because you don't want that folder in there all the time. Of course, the disadvantage is that you have to maintain multiple solutions, but if you set them up well initially, then it's not going to bother you while working with it. So what does the future offer us? Well, I guess that Azure Apps isn't supported yet, but I think for smaller companies, smaller Sitecore implementations, it could be very attractive. It offers automatic scaling, and it has way faster startup times, almost near to instant. The uptime is great too, and you do not require enablement servers, so that's an advantage for your licensing as well. You do have less control though, and currently it also requires some manual configuration. And there's one thing more, and that is that Azure Apps doesn't offer anything higher than the A3, that's the large machine, and that is actually the minimum requirement of Sitecore. So you cannot scale up, you only can scale out, but considering the Microsoft philosophy, that would be the best way nonetheless. But for enterprise solutions, I still think PaaS will gain popularity in the upcoming year, and I think we will see a lot more PaaS implementations in 2015 and 16. Well, this was the time when I asked for questions. Of course, you can't ask them right now, but if you do have any questions or remarks, just let me know, post them on my blog, or comment on the video, and I can see if I can help you out or answer your question. And lastly, I want to thank you for your attention, and I also want to thank all the sponsors that made this Sitecore User Group conference possible. I want to invite you to visit my blog and to share your knowledge and expertise, your experience with the Sitecore Azure way of working, because I'm very interested in your opinion and experience as well. Thank you very much. Bye bye.